Sweetheart, you're replaceable. That's what the new CEO said to me the day he signed my termination papers. He leaned back in the leather chair like a man who thought arrogance was a strategy. His suit too crisp, his grin too rehearsed. A predator who'd never missed a steak dinner, let alone a quarterly bonus. He didn't even look at me when he slid the paper across the desk. He looked at the window, as if the skyline was applauding him. I didn't say a word. Not when he smirked. Not when he said I should be grateful for the severance. And certainly not when he dismissed 15 years of sweat, loyalty, and results with a flick of his pen. He thought silence meant surrender. What he didn't understand was that silence sometimes means calculation. 10 minutes later, HR had me in a glass box, shoving a packet toward me like it was a birthday card. Severance numbers printed in polite black ink. Security waiting just outside the door, the same way they wait for a thief. My badge blinked red before I'd even signed the last page. They handed me a tote bag with the company logo, like that made it a clean goodbye. Like a piece of corporate swag could patch over the fact that they had just gutted their own lifeline with a lazy stroke of a pen. When I walked past my desk for the last time, my hand brushed against the spine of a worn leather folder. Edges curled, pages heavy with notes. That folder had followed me through layoffs, recessions, and midnight flights that bled into sunrise meetings. It wasn't just paper. It was memory, strategy, and 15 years of relationships no software could replicate. Every page was inked with something a CRM system could never understand. Trust. And trust has a longer shelf life than any CEO. The folder held more than history. It held leverage. Two of the biggest clients on our books, whales, as the sales teams love to call them, had clauses written in black and white. Key person dependency. My name. Spelled out. Explicit. No me, no contract. The kind of clause that isn't common in corporate law because it makes executives nervous. But my clients had insisted. They didn't buy a logo. They bought me. The new CEO didn't know that. Or worse, he didn't care. He thought everyone was a number on a spreadsheet. Replaceable, scalable, interchangeable. He thought AI emails and glossy webinars could replace the quiet power of a 6 a.m. phone call when a client's child was sick, or the handwritten thank you note I mailed after a renewal. He thought contracts were about signatures. I knew they were about people. On my monitor, taped to the corner, was a sticky note that had lived there for years. Check section 7.4. I wrote it late one night after another executive tried to edge me out of a deal I'd closed. It was my insurance policy. My quiet little grenade tucked into the fine print. That clause was going to matter. A lot more than they realized. I smiled when I saw it. Not the smile you give a friend, but the smile you give when you know the story isn't over. As I walked out, tote bag swinging at my side, the security guard gave me that half-sympathetic nod they save for people who just lost their jobs but didn't deserve to. My heels echoed against the tile. Sharp, steady. I didn't look back. Because I didn't need to. My mind was already in the future, calculating the bleed they had just set in motion. And there would be a bleed. I counted it out in my head like drum beats. 2 weeks until Client A's renewal. 3 until Client B's quarterly review. Each one anchored to my name. Each one wired directly into that old leather folder they thought was replaceable. Here's the thing about arrogance. It blinds people to the obvious. The CEO thought he'd cut out dead weight. What he'd actually done was light a fuse. By the time my tote bag hit the passenger seat of my car, I already knew how this was going to play out. 2 weeks wasn't long, but in corporate terms, it was an eternity. Plenty of time for cracks to widen into fractures. As the skyline shrank in my rearview mirror, I felt something unexpected. Not fear, not anger. Peace, cold, clean peace. Because I wasn't the one scrambling. They were. They just didn't know it yet. And when the phone started buzzing 2 weeks later with whispers from the inside about chaos in the boardroom, I knew it had begun. The slow bleed, the unraveling, the storm building that no one could stop. They thought firing me ended the story. It was just the prologue. The first whisper came from a friend still inside. 2 weeks hadn't even passed when my phone lit up with a number I knew by heart. She didn't waste time with pleasantries. Kira, client A just sent their termination notice. Legal's panicking. Her voice was hushed, like she was calling from a closet. I didn't answer right away. I let the silence sit, long enough that she finally added, "It's because of you, isn't it?" I didn't confirm. I didn't have to. She knew. Client A's contract was worth more in annual revenue than half of the CEO's pet projects combined. I'd spent years weaving that relationship brick by brick. Midnight dinners, early morning calls, last-minute flights to patch over problems before they grew teeth. And now, it was gone with a single email. Per Section 7.4, due to the Key Person Dependency Clause, we are terminating effective immediately. That line was the legal equivalent of a grenade pin. I laughed when I read it. Not from joy, not from spite, but from the absurdity. The CEO had dismissed me as replaceable, and now one clause he'd never bothered to read was costing him tens of millions. Inside the company, chaos spread like smoke. My friend in operations described it perfectly. It's like watching a kitchen catch fire while the head chef insists it's just the oven running hot. The new CEO tried to calm the board with buzzwords. Transition pains, expected churn, strategic pivot. But numbers don't bend to buzzwords. Revenue bleeding out isn't a pivot, it's a wound. Client B was next. I saw it coming. Their quarterly review was my ritual, a rhythm I'd never missed. I didn't need to call them. They already knew. When the new CEO sent a glossy slide deck and a mass email instead of a call, their CFO forwarded it to me with just 3 words. "This is insulting." I typed a polite reply, short and careful. "Per your contract, please see Section 7.4. That was all I needed to say. 2 days later, their termination notice hit the company inbox. $60 million gone. 2 clients that weren't logos. They were relationships. The call started then. First HR, then the CFO, then finally the CEO himself. His voice wasn't smug anymore. It was gravel and caffeine, the kind of tone men use when they've been awake too long staring at the ceiling. "You can't do this." He barked before I could even say hello. "We'll sue. We'll compel performance. You think you're clever, but you'll be back here in chains if I have to drag you." I let him rant. Let him spill threats like bullets into the receiver, because I knew something he didn't. The contract in my folder wasn't a shield. It was a sword. Section 7.4 wasn't vague. It was iron. Negotiated years ago after another exec tried to cut me out, fought line by line until counsel finally admitted, "If they sign this, you're bulletproof." So I smiled into the silence after his tirade and said calmly, "Then let's read the contract together." He hung up on me, but the invitation came anyway, sliding into my inbox under the subject line, "Emergency Strategy Session. Mandatory attendance." I accepted, replied with a single line, "Please confirm counsel will be present." Because I wasn't stepping into that boardroom without a lawyer in the room to read the same words I was about to put in front of them. The night before the meeting, I spread everything across my dining table. Employment agreement, license contracts, performance reviews, email chains, 15 years of ink and signatures. It looked less like paperwork and more like a general's map before battle. I thought about what those papers represented. Not revenge, not pettiness, just proof. Proof that relationships can't be commoditized. Proof that loyalty means something, even if executives like him don't see it until it's gone. And maybe that's the message here. People remember who shows up for them. At the hospital, at their kids' science fair, at the midnight crisis no one else wanted to take. That's why the clients walked. Not because of a clause, but because they knew I was the one in their corner. You can't outsource that. You can't automate it. And you sure as hell can't replace it. When I finally closed the folder, I felt that same clean peace again. No adrenaline spike, no shaking hands. Just certainty. Tomorrow, they'd sit across from me thinking they were still in control. But when the lawyer's eyes hit section 7.4, they'd realize the truth. They hadn't fired me. They'd handed me the detonator. The boardroom was colder than I remembered. Maybe it was the HVAC, set low on purpose. Or maybe it was the tension hanging in the air. When I stepped through the glass doors, every eye shifted toward me. The CEO sat at the head of the table, jaw tight, coffee in a paper cup instead of his polished stainless tumbler. A small detail, but telling. Men like him don't switch habits unless sleep has stopped coming. The VP of sales was there too, the same one who'd grinned when I was walked out. He leaned back in his chair like this was theater, and I was the entertainment. HR sat rigid near the corner, flipping through papers they didn't need to flip. And next to the CEO sat the company's general counsel, glasses low on his nose, pen tapping a steady rhythm against the table. I carried only two things: a slim leather folio with 3 copies of my employment agreement and a separate folder marked in bold black ink, key person contracts. I took the seat they'd left at the far end of the table, my heels clicking against tile, tote bag set down gently at my side. Calm, silent. The kind of silence that makes other people nervous. The CEO started with bluster. "Kira, let's not waste time. You've already cost this company 2 major clients. That's breach of duty. Our position is simple. You return to assist with transitions, or we'll pursue legal remedies. We won't hesitate to compel performance." He said, compel performance like it was a threat carved in stone. I didn't argue. I didn't interrupt. I just unzipped the folio slowly, the sound loud in the still room, and slid 1 copy of my employment agreement toward him, 1 toward counsel, and 1 toward HR. "Then let's read it together," I said, my voice even, steady. The VP smirked, whispering something under his breath. The CEO ignored him, flipping pages with the impatience of someone who expected to win by volume. Counsel, however, slowed down almost immediately. His eyes moved quickly at first, then slowed, lips pressing tighter as he reached section 7.4. That's where I had placed a yellow sticky flag. Counsel stopped tapping his pen. Read the line again. And again. His lips moved silently, tracing the words as if to confirm he hadn't misread them. Section 7.4. Upon termination without cause, any client designated as key person dependent shall have the right to terminate immediately, with all restrictions on employee solicitation or competition dissolved. He adjusted his glasses. Read the next clause. Any attempt to compel post-termination performance shall trigger a mandatory buyout equal to 2.5 times the trailing 12-month revenue of key person contracts. His pen fell silent. He looked up at me, then at the CEO, and said nothing. Sometimes silence is the loudest verdict in the room. The VP scoffed. Generous language, no way that holds up. I turned my head slowly toward him. It's not generous, it's signed. And then I reached into the separate folder and slid out 3 stapled packets. Contracts for Client A, Client B, and Client C, each one with my name highlighted in bold under Key Person Dependency. The sound of paper sliding across the polished table was almost theatrical. Counsel picked one up, scanned it, and let out the faintest exhale. These are enforceable. His tone was low but final. The CEO leaned back, shoulders tightening as if he could physically distance himself from the words on the page. We never agreed to. You did, I said. Calm, measured. You agreed when you signed my renewal 3 years ago. The same renewal you never read because you were too busy rushing to the golf course. Counsel approved it. HR filed it. And now it's binding. HR shuffled their papers again, but this time not to stall, to hide the flush creeping up their neck. I let the silence stretch, forcing them to sit with it. This isn't about me refusing to help, I added finally. It's about the fact that you can't compel what you don't own. Those clients didn't sign with your logo. They signed with me. You thought I was replaceable. They disagreed. The VP tried again, louder this time. This is extortion. You're holding the company hostage. Counsel didn't even look at him. He just read the clause again out loud, slowly, deliberately. Mandatory buyout equal to 2.5 times the trailing 12-month revenue. His voice was steady, but his face had gone pale. That number wasn't small. The CEO's pen slipped in his hand. He set it down like it was suddenly too heavy. HR finally stopped shuffling papers altogether. And for the first time since I walked into that boardroom, the smirk fell from the VP's face. I folded my hands on the table. My voice stayed calm. This is arithmetic, not emotion. You fired me without cause. You broke trust with the clients. Now the contract does what it was designed to do: protect the relationships I built. I tapped the page lightly once. You don't need to like it. You just need to pay it. No one spoke after that. Not for a long moment. The hum of fluorescent lights filled the silence, sharp and electric. And in that silence, I knew. The tide had turned. The silence in the boardroom wasn't polite. It was the kind of silence that hangs in the air when everyone realizes the numbers no longer work in their favor. The general counsel broke it first. He leaned forward, pressing his palm flat against section 7.4, like he needed to hold the words in place. We need trailing revenue numbers for these contracts, he said quietly. Not to me, but to the CFO seated 2 chairs away. The CFO didn't argue. He didn't even look up, just snapped his fingers at a junior analyst by the door. The analyst left in a hurry, laptop open, moving the way people move when they know they've been sent to fetch the guillotine. The CEO tried to fill the gap with noise. This is absurd. Clients don't just walk away from relationships this size over one person. Churn is normal. They'll come back once emotions settle. I let him talk. Let him twist the narrative in his head. Because what he didn't understand was that relationships weren't a funnel metric. They were living, breathing things. And when you insult them with canned webinars and mass emails, they don't come back. They leave. The door opened again. The analyst whispered numbers into the CFO's ear, and the CFO's shoulders slumped like a man watching his bonus dissolve in front of him. He scribbled something on a notepad, then slid it toward counsel. Counsel read it once, then twice. His pen stopped moving altogether. High 7 figures, he said finally, voice low but clear enough for the whole table. Multiply that by 2.5. The air thinned. Everyone knew what that meant. The VP was the first to crack. She's bluffing. No way those clauses are enforceable. No court. Counsel cut him off, glasses sliding down his nose. They're enforceable, they were signed, and they're already triggered. The VP went quiet. The CEO leaned back in his chair, staring at the ceiling like the tiles might offer an escape hatch. His face was pale now, his arrogance gone, replaced by something closer to disbelief. And then I spoke, calm, deliberate. You call it absurd. I call it arithmetic. Client A walked, Client B walked. That's $60 million in annual revenue already gone. Add the buyout, and you're looking at damages no pep talk can erase. I paused, letting the numbers settle over them like weight. But that's not the only arithmetic at play. You've used my materials since my termination. Lighthouse scripts, retention frameworks. Every login has a timestamp. That's willful infringement. Fee shifting applies, which means you don't just pay damages. You pay my attorney fees on top. The HR director finally spoke, voice brittle. We thought those documents were company property. I reached into my folder and slid across the most recent license agreement, the expiration date circled in red ink. They were licensed, not assigned. And the license expired the day you walked me out. No renewal, no payment. Every use since then is a breach. Counsel read it, his lips pressed into a thin line. She's right. The CEO rubbed his temples with both hands, the way people do when a headache turns into a migraine. What do you want? His voice wasn't sharp anymore. It was tired. That was the moment the power shifted completely. I pulled 2 envelopes from my folio, labeled in neat black letters. Option A and Option B. I set them side by side on the polished table. You can open them now or later, I said evenly, but the clock is already running. The CFO stared at the thicker envelope, then looked away quickly. Counsel adjusted his glasses, scanning my face as if to gauge whether I was bluffing. I wasn't. Option A, I continued, is your narrow escape. Retain me as an independent consultant at $900 an hour, 200 hours minimum, paid in advance. You reinstate the lighthouse license for 12 months at triple the previous rate, and the VP resigns effective immediately. The VP's head snapped toward me, his mouth open, but I didn't give him room to interrupt. Option B, I said, tapping the second envelope lightly, is cleaner but bloodier. I decline. I join your competitor, who already has my 3 whales signed and sealed. You wire the buyout amount plus infringement damages by Friday at 5 p.m. No extensions, no negotiations. The VP tried again, louder this time. This is extortion. I tilted my head, meeting his eyes with the calm patience of someone watching a child throw a tantrum. Then I turned back to counsel. Is it extortion when it's written in the contract you approved? Counsel didn't look at the VP, didn't look at me. He just closed the agreement with a soft thud and said quietly, "It's enforceable." The room sagged under the weight of those 2 words. I sat back, folding my hands loosely in my lap. No gloating, no dramatics, just arithmetic. Because revenge isn't always loud. Sometimes it's paper, signatures, and numbers written in ink dark enough to bleed through. And they had just realized the bill was coming due. No one touched the envelopes. Counsel asked for 10 minutes. We all stood. I stepped into the hallway where the air smelled faintly of disinfectant and burnt coffee. Through the glass, I could see the CEO leaning over Counsel's shoulder, while the CFO punched numbers into a calculator that looked too small for the size of the mistake. When they called me back in, the CEO tried for neutral. Option A with modifications, he said. Rate reduced, no advance, and no mention of... His eyes flicked to the VP. Personnel changes. I shook my head once. No. He exhaled through his nose. Then option B is impossible by Friday. Treasury cycles. You can escrow by noon and wire by deadline, I said. Your bank knows how. Counsel didn't argue. He knew I was right. He only asked, "Are your clients actually signed with the competitor?" I slid a sheet across the table. 3 letters, each on the competitor's letterhead, each naming me as key person. Not bravado. Paper. Counsel's face changed the way horizons change when a storm arrives. He leaned toward the CEO and whispered, barely audible, "Oh my God." That was the first honest thing anyone had said all day. The VP tried a different angle. You realize how this makes you look in the market? Not a team player. Burning bridges. I didn't take the bait. I didn't set the fire, I said. You did when you told the clients they'd get a webinar instead of a call. Silence again. The kind that makes the hum of the lights sound like a wire about to snap. 48 hours, the CEO said finally, voice thin. We'll decide. You have 24, I answered. The clock is not your asset anymore. I left the building the same way I'd left 2 weeks earlier. Heels steady, toed at my side, eyes forward. At home, I laid everything out again. Contracts, licenses, access logs. Not because I doubted the case, because order calms the mind. I brewed tea. I answered 2 texts from old colleagues, short, neutral. I slept. Morning brought an email at 7:12 a.m. Subject line, Option A, revised. I opened it. Lower rate, fewer hours, license at the old price. No resignation. It read like someone bargaining with a locked door. I replied with 1 sentence. My offer stands until Friday, 5 p.m. Eastern Time. At 10:03 a.m., counsel called from a blocked number. If we take B, he said quietly, we'll need your assurance of no public statements. Standard mutual non-disparagement, I said. And a release of claims. You'll want one too. We will, he said. Pause. Your access logs? Where did you get them? I set alerts on shared folders that contained my license materials, I said. They pinged after I was terminated. Dates, IPs, user IDs. Another pause. Right. Paper shuffling. Expect a draft. By noon, escrow confirmation hit my inbox. By 2, the settlement draft arrived. Wire by Friday, 5 p.m. Buyout per 7.4. Fees per the license breach. Mutual releases. Non-disparagement. No admission of fault. The usual fiction two parties tell when math is the only language left. I asked for one change. A one-paragraph acknowledgement. Lighthouse is an employee-originated methodology licensed on a term basis. Ownership remains with the creator. It wasn't about pride. It was about closing the loop so no one in any future meeting could pretend they hadn't known. Counsel agreed without a fight. At 4:43 p.m. Friday, my banking app flashed. The wire landed. Big number, small screen. I took a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding and then forwarded the confirmation to counsel with a single line. Received. He replied 3 minutes later. Settlement effective upon confirmation. No signatures, no speeches, just the quiet end of something that should never have been started. I didn't celebrate. I washed the tea mug I'd used all week and set it on the rack. Then I opened a plain cardboard box and slid the old company tote inside. Donation pile. It wasn't anger. It was housekeeping. On Monday, I took the elevator up to the competitor's office. New badge, new photo. Same work. Protecting relationships that actually mean something. Their COO shook my hand and said, "We're not buying your contacts. We're investing in your judgment." It sounded like a line until I saw the way their account teams worked. Calls before slides, names before numbers. That afternoon, I called each client, not to spike the ball, just to set expectations. Clean transitions, no fireworks. "We'll do this right," I told them. "No one gets hurt for sport." They appreciated that. People always do. In the quiet after, I opened the leather folder one last time. The sticky note. Check section 7.4 was still there, edges curling. I peeled it off and stuck it to the inside cover of a fresh notebook. Not as a trophy, as a reminder. Read closely, fight early, write it down. A friend from the old place texted later. They're blaming the economy. I typed and deleted a dozen replies before I settled on the only true one. They confuse tools with trust. Here's the part I hope someone hears. People aren't head count. They're the moat. You don't keep clients because your logo is big. You keep them because you showed up when their life was messy and their calendar was full and your help wasn't convenient. You keep them because you told the truth, early and often, even when lawyers winced. Contracts matter. So do casseroles and hospital visits and remembering a kid's name. One without the other is just a transaction. The other without one is just hope. Together, they're a bond. As the sun slid down the glass of the opposite tower, an email pinged from the competitor's CFO. "Welcome aboard. Your calendar is full. Your runway is clear." I smiled at the phrasing. Full. Clear. Two words that rarely travel together. I closed the folder, slid it into the drawer. The story wasn't revenge anymore. It was arithmetic and choices, and the simple fact that I refused to be reduced to a line item by a man who thought volume equals power. He said I was replaceable. The clients decided otherwise. I still remember the first time I realized something was wrong. It was late on a Tuesday evening, the kind of night when most people were home having dinner with their families. But me? I was still at the office, surrounded by spreadsheets, quarterly forecasts, and glowing screens. I had been with the company for 9 years, long enough to know every corner of our operations and every client expectation by heart. Numbers were my language, and accuracy was my pride. But that night, the numbers didn't make sense. At first, I thought I was overtired. I blinked, rubbed my temples, and recalculated. But no matter how many times I ran the formulas, they were wrong. Ridiculously wrong. Losses where there should have been gains, contracts that suddenly appeared unprofitable, invoices that had never crossed my desk. It wasn't just one report. It was all of them. That's when my stomach dropped. Someone had tampered with my work. The next morning, I walked into the office a little earlier than usual. I wanted to check the files on the shared drive before anyone else arrived. As I logged in, I noticed something odd. The last person who had accessed the files wasn't me. It was Ryan Cole, the CEO's son. He had only joined the company 3 months ago, parachuted straight into a management role he hadn't earned. He didn't know the first thing about finance or client accounts, but he strutted around like he owned the place. Most people kept quiet, choosing to tolerate his arrogance because of who his father was. But I hadn't. 2 weeks earlier, during a strategy meeting, Ryan had mocked one of my colleagues, a junior analyst who had made a small mistake on a projection. Ryan laughed in front of everyone and said, "Maybe we should hire people who can actually count." I couldn't hold back. I told him sharply that belittling employees wasn't leadership. It was bullying. The room had gone silent. Ryan had smirked, but his eyes told me everything. He wasn't going to forget that. And now here I was, staring at corrupted numbers in my reports, all last edited by him. By 9 a.m., the office was buzzing. I tried to keep calm, but my chest felt heavy, like I was walking around with a secret grenade that could go off at any second. I didn't have to wait long. At 10:15 sharp, my boss, Mr. Harrison, stormed into my office. His face was red, and he slapped a stack of printed spreadsheets onto my desk. "Lisa," he barked, "these mistakes are unacceptable. What happened here?" I froze for a second, my hands hovering above my keyboard. I wanted to explain, to defend myself, but something in his tone told me he wasn't here for excuses. He was here for blood. My heart pounded in my ears as I glanced at the papers. The same errors I had discovered last night stared back at me. Numbers twisted beyond recognition. I looked up at him, steadying my voice. "Mr. Harrison," I said carefully, "I need you to take a closer look before you accuse me. These aren't mistakes. They're alterations." He frowned, confusion flickering across his face, but only for a moment before frustration took over. "Alterations? Are you saying someone else did this?" I didn't answer right away. Instead, I reached into my bag and pulled out a small USB drive. I slid it across the table slowly, deliberately. "What's this?" he asked, his voice sharp. "Proof," I replied. He hesitated, narrowing his eyes at me before finally plugging it into his laptop. I watched as his expression shifted, his skin paling as file after file opened on the screen. I had anticipated this moment. The USB contained system logs I had quietly backed up the night before. Timestamps, usernames, and access histories. Every single change in my reports traced back to one account. Ryan Cole. Mr. Harrison's hands tightened around the mouse. His jaw clenched as he scrolled through the evidence, his face growing whiter with every click. The room was silent except for the hum of the computer. Finally, he leaned back in his chair, staring at me as if seeing me for the first time. "Lisa, where did you get this?" I met his gaze evenly. "From the audit trail. I've been documenting every suspicious change since last week." He looked down again, disbelief etched into his features. "Ryan," he muttered under his breath. I didn't say anything. I didn't have to. For a brief moment, I thought he might apologize, might admit that he'd been too quick to accuse me. But instead, he pinched the bridge of his nose and exhaled slowly. "You have no idea what you've just stepped into," he said finally, his voice low. And just like that, the game had changed. Mr. Harrison's words echoed in my head. You have no idea what you've just stepped into. I sat frozen in my chair, watching him rub his temples as if the weight of the company had just collapsed onto his shoulders. The silence was suffocating. Finally, he spoke again, his voice quieter this time. Lisa, listen to me carefully. Do not talk about this with anyone. Not your team, not your colleagues, no one. My brows furrowed. Why not? You saw the proof yourself. Ryan altered my work. He tried to frame me. Harrison's eyes darted to the closed door, then back to me. Because he's not just anyone. He's the CEO's son. If this blows up the wrong way, it won't be him they sacrifice. It'll be you. I swallowed hard. His words stung because they felt true. In this world, nepotism wasn't just an ugly rumor. It was survival. Still, something inside me rebelled. Why should I carry the blame for his mess? Mr. Harrison, I said firmly, I won't be the scapegoat. I've worked too hard for this. He sighed, leaning back in his chair. For a moment, I saw something almost like sympathy in his eyes. But then his expression hardened again. You need to play this smart. I'll handle Ryan. For now, keep your head down. Focus on your work. I wanted to argue, but I didn't. Instead, I nodded, though my chest burned with frustration. The rest of that day dragged like a nightmare. Whispers followed me through the halls. I could feel eyes on me whenever I passed. At lunch, 2 analysts went quiet the moment I walked into the break room. It was obvious Ryan had already started spinning his version of the story. By 3 p.m., the tension was unbearable. That's when Nicole, a colleague from marketing I'd known for years, slipped into my office. She closed the door quickly, her voice low. Lisa, what's going on? People are saying you botched the quarterly reports. Ryan's been telling anyone who'll listen that you've lost your grip. I clenched my jaw. That's a lie. She studied me, hesitant. Then why aren't you defending yourself? I hesitated, weighing Harrison's warning in my mind. Because sometimes the truth needs the right timing. And trust me, Nicole, Ryan won't get away with this. Her eyes widened, curiosity mixing with concern, but she didn't press further. She just gave my hand a squeeze before slipping back out. That evening, long after most people had left, I sat alone at my desk, staring at the dim glow of my monitor. I replayed the entire day in my mind. Harrison's warning, the whispers, Ryan's smear campaign already taking root. I should have been furious, but what I felt most was determination. I wasn't going to let Ryan define me. I had spent nearly a decade building this department. I had trained most of the people now running client accounts. My numbers had saved contracts others thought were dead. And now some spoiled man-boy thought he could undo all of that with a few altered spreadsheets? Number not this time. I opened my private folder on my laptop, the one I had started keeping after noticing the first odd changes. Inside were dozens of screenshots, time-stamped logs, and even emails Ryan had corrected in ways that made no sense. Piece by piece, I had built a paper trail. Enough to prove that what was happening wasn't incompetence. It was sabotage. Still, one question haunted me. Why? Yes, I had embarrassed him in that meeting 2 weeks ago. But was his ego really so fragile he'd risk everything to destroy me? Or was there more at play here? The next morning answered that question. I arrived early again, hoping to get ahead of whatever storm Ryan was brewing. As I settled in, I overheard voices drifting from the conference room down the hall. Ryan's voice, sharp and mocking, carried through the glass walls. She's unstable, he said. Ever since the divorce, she's been slipping. Numbers don't lie. We can't afford someone like that handling clients. My stomach turned to ice. Divorce? He was using my personal life now? Another voice chimed in, one of the junior managers. But Lisa's been here for years. She closed the Kingsford account. She's reliable. Ryan laughed. Reliable? She's a liability. Trust me, it's only a matter of time before she cracks completely. I stood frozen in the hallway, every word cutting deeper. He wasn't just sabotaging my work. He was building a narrative, piece by piece, designed to erase me. I walked away quietly before anyone noticed me listening. My hands trembled, but not from fear, from resolve. By noon, I was called into another meeting with Mr. Harrison. He looked weary, dark circles under his eyes. "Lisa, I've spoken with Ryan," he said carefully. "He claims your reports were simply errors, mistakes you're now trying to cover up. He even suggested you might be struggling personally." The air in the room thickened. "He's lying," I said flatly. Harrison nodded slowly. "I believe you. But belief isn't enough in this business. You need to be ready for what's coming." I leaned forward. "Then let me be clear. I've kept every record, every log. If he thinks he can bury me with stories, he's in for a surprise." Harrison studied me for a long moment, then gave a small, almost imperceptible smile. "Good, because I think you're going to need it." That night, as I left the office, my phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. My breath caught as I read it. "Stay quiet, Lisa, or you'll regret it." For the first time since this started, I realized Ryan wasn't just playing office games. He was escalating, and I had to be ready. The message burned on my phone screen. "Stay quiet, Lisa, or you'll regret it." For a long moment, I just stood there in the dim office parking lot, the hum of the streetlights filling the silence. My first instinct was to laugh. How ridiculous that Ryan thought an anonymous threat would scare me into silence. But underneath the anger, a chill ran through me. This wasn't just childish sabotage anymore. He was cornered, and desperate men made dangerous choices. I slipped the phone back into my purse, my mind already racing. I had two options: ignore it and hope he'd get bored, or do what I'd always done: document everything. I chose the latter. When I got home that night, I pulled out the small black notebook I had been keeping for weeks. Each page was filled with dates, times, and descriptions of every suspicious change, every whisper I'd overheard, every reaction I'd seen in the office. Now I added one more line. Threat received. Unknown number, 9:47 p.m. The next morning, I arrived early again. My stomach knotted as I pushed open the glass doors to the lobby, half expecting Ryan to be waiting there with another smirk or some fresh humiliation. But the lobby was empty. For once, it was quiet. Still, the calm didn't last. By mid-morning, word spread that the quarterly review with the board had been moved up a week. Normally, I would have been in the center of preparing those reports. This time, Ryan was leading the process. He was determined to use those doctored numbers to paint a story. At 11 o'clock, Nicole appeared in my office again. She shut the door softly, her expression troubled. "Lisa, I think you should know. Ryan's been telling the board you've lost focus. He said you're—" She hesitated, lowering her voice. "Unstable. He's pushing hard for you to be replaced." I let out a slow breath. "He's building a case, one piece of fiction at a time." Her brow furrowed. "Can't you go straight to Mr. Cole? He'd listen to you, wouldn't he?" I shook my head. "Not yet. If I go too early without enough proof, it'll look like I'm the one stirring drama. I need everything airtight before I make a move." Nicole studied me for a moment, then nodded. "Then make it airtight. Because Ryan's not slowing down." That afternoon, I requested IT to run a trace on the threatening message. It was a long shot, but to my surprise, the technician called me later that day. "Lisa, the number was a prepaid SIM, untraceable. But—" His voice dropped lower. "The phone used to send it logged into the company Wi-Fi yesterday. Someone sent it from inside the office." The puzzle pieces were falling into place. Ryan wasn't just reckless. He was sloppy. I went home that night and backed up every file I had onto two separate encrypted drives. One I kept hidden in my apartment, the other I stored in my car. If Ryan wanted to escalate, I'd be ready. 2 days later, the board review loomed closer. The office buzzed with nervous energy. Assistants running with stacks of paper, executives whispering in corners. I kept to myself, quietly working, quietly watching. That's when I overheard something that made my blood run cold. Passing by the copy room, I caught Ryan's voice again, low and conspiratorial. "She'll crack under pressure," he was saying to one of the junior executives. "When the board sees her fall apart, they'll have no choice but to let her go. Trust me, I've got this handled." The junior executive didn't respond. He just nodded weakly, and Ryan clapped him on the shoulder before striding out. I slipped away before anyone saw me, my pulse racing. He wasn't just sabotaging my work. He was planning a public spectacle. He wanted me humiliated in front of the board. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop open, reviewing everything. The audit logs, the spreadsheets, the screenshots, even recordings from my phone of Ryan's insults in the hallway. Piece by piece, I assembled them into a timeline so clear a child could follow it. But the final piece was still missing. A direct link between Ryan and the altered files. I had logs that showed his account, but accounts could be argued. It wasn't me. It was my assistant. That's what he'd say. And then, just before midnight, I remembered something. 3 weeks earlier, during one of his arrogant speeches in the break room, Ryan had bragged that he never logged out of his computer because passwords are for people who don't matter. At the time, I'd rolled my eyes. Now, it was my key. If IT could confirm his device had been the one logged in during the alterations, not just his account, it would close the loop. The proof would be irrefutable. I fired off a late-night request to the systems team, attaching the dates and times I had collected. Then I closed my laptop, sat back in my chair, and whispered to myself, "Let him think I'm cornered. Let him think he's winning." The next morning, my phone buzzed with an email from IT. My hands shook as I opened it. Every alteration had been made from Ryan's personal workstation, his laptop, his logins, his device. I exhaled slowly, my chest finally easing for the first time in weeks. The missing piece was mine. Now, it wasn't just about defending myself anymore. It was about exposing him for what he really was. And with the board meeting just days away, I knew exactly when and how to strike. The IT email was still open at 7:30 a.m., every change traced to Ryan's laptop. I printed the message, access logs, and my timeline, sent an encrypted copy to compliance, then slid everything into a plain folder. At 8:45, Mr. Harrison paused at my door. "You ready?" "As I'll ever be." "Facts only," he said, eyeing the folder. By 9 a.m., the boardroom was full. Directors, general counsel, Mr. Cole at the head, Ryan to his right. I took a chair against the glass wall. The first slide, Q2 variances. Ryan began smoothly. "We've identified recurring errors in finance. Corrective actions are underway." Mr. Cole's tone was neutral. "Walk us through the numbers." Ryan clicked through charts that matched the doctored files. Red arrows, missed targets, a neat story of decline. "Lisa," Mr. Cole said, turning to me, "these are your reports. Anything to add?" "Yes." I set the folder between Mr. Cole and counsel. These variances come from edits made after sign-off. IT records show user, device, and timestamps for each change. Ryan laughed under his breath. "She's covering her tracks." The edits originated from Mr. Cole Jr.'s workstation. I slid a single page forward, 3 lines highlighted. Counsel scanned quickly. "We should verify with IT." "I asked them to be on standby," I said. A knock. Harrison opened the door. Daniel from Systems entered. "We confirmed device IDs and session tokens," he said. "The changes came from Ryan Cole's laptop while docked at his desk. Badge records place him in the building at those times." "Anyone could have used my machine," Ryan said. "Your token was active," Daniel replied. "Auto lock disabled. Same session across all events." I placed another sheet on the table. "Here are before and after files with checksums, plus the reversion commits I made when I detected the changes. And here is IT's email confirming device-level attribution." I hesitated. I also received an anonymous text telling me to stay quiet. IT traced the phone to company Wi-Fi the afternoon it was sent. For the first time, Mr. Cole looked tired. He turned to his son. Ryan? Ryan spread his hands. This is theater. She's been erratic for months. Ask her team. My team can produce any ticket you want, I said. All deadlines met. The audit trail is here. I tapped the folder. Facts, not adjectives. Silence settled. Counsel spoke. We recommend immediate preservation of data and a formal internal investigation. Do it, Mr. Cole said. He turned to Harrison. Lisa remains in role. Reassign report ownership temporarily. No performance flags pending the outcome. Ryan's chair scraped. You're taking her side over your own. Sit, Mr. Cole said quietly. The meeting stumbled through 2 more agenda items. No one was listening. When we adjourned, most of the board filed out quickly. Mr. Cole stayed seated, staring at the highlighted lines. Lisa, he said, finally looking up. Thank you for documenting this. You shouldn't have had to do it alone. I wasn't alone, I said. Systems helped, and Mr. Harrison. Harrison gave a brief, apologetic nod. Mr. Cole exhaled. Security will escort you to your car this week. That won't be necessary, I started, then stopped. Thank you. In the hallway, Nicole waited near the elevators, eyes questioning. I mouthed, later. In my office, I closed the door and sat until my hands stopped shaking. Relief wasn't the feeling. Not yet. At noon, an email from counsel hit. Hold notice, do not alter, delete, or destroy any potentially relevant materials. It went to half the leadership team. 10 minutes later, facilities confirmed Ryan's badge had been deactivated, pending review. I didn't smile. I wrote both times in my notebook. Documentation wasn't just a habit anymore. It was a boundary. Around 3, Harrison stepped in. He's been asked to work from home, he said. Suspended? Not officially yet. I nodded. Then I'll keep my head down and keep working. He hesitated. Lisa, I'm sorry I came at you the way I did. You came with the information you had? I said. Now we have the rest. He left. I looked at the spreadsheet on my screen. The real one, every cell balanced to the penny, and felt something ease. Numbers are boring until someone lies about them. Then they become a map. Before shutting down, I added 2 more items to my timeline and sent counsel a note offering to sit for questions and provide my drives. Transparent, complete, calm. At 6:12 p.m., a new message from an unknown number lit my phone. You think this is over? I took a screenshot, saved it to the folder, and powered the phone off. No, I thought. It wasn't over. But for the first time, I wasn't the one on the edge. 12 days after the boardroom meeting, I sat in a small conference room with a carafe of stale coffee and a stack of my own notes. Legal, compliance, and a quiet HR rep took seats across from me. It didn't feel like a showdown. It felt like an audit. Slow, methodical, unforgiving. I handed over both encrypted drives and my notebook. Dates, times, file hashes, email headers, the anonymous text screenshots. They asked measured questions. I answered with facts. No adjectives, no speculation. When they finished, the HR rep, soft-spoken, meticulous, asked one last thing. Do you feel safe at work? I paused, then nodded. I feel prepared. 2 days later, security collected the assistant's laptop. The rumor mill churned, but I stayed at my desk and closed out the week's reconciliations like nothing had happened. Numbers, at least, are honest when you let them be. The formal update landed the following Tuesday at 9:10 a.m., subject line. Investigation findings. Next steps. It went to the board, council, and a handful of senior leaders. Harrison appeared at my door within minutes. They want to see you. The boardroom felt different this time. Less oxygen, more clarity. Mr. Cole stood, hands on the back of his chair, a file in front of him. He didn't make a speech. Lisa, he said, We reviewed the logs, the device data, and the network records. Multiple policy violations occurred, falsifying financial documents, interfering with internal controls, and retaliation. The anonymous message came from a device authenticated to the guest network by someone using Ryan's executive suite credentials. We cannot prove he pressed send. He gestured to the file. But we can prove the altered reports came from his machine under his session in our building. He sat. Counsel picked up. Effective immediately, Ryan Cole is no longer employed here. The assistant is terminated for cause. We've filed preservation requests with vendors and are implementing additional controls. Silence settled. The honest kind that comes after bad weather clears. Mr. Cole looked older than I'd ever seen him. You should not have had to carry this, he said. I'm sorry. I nodded once. Thank you. They dismissed me with next steps. IT upgrades, access reviews, temporary dual approval for all report sign-offs, and a request that I help draft the new process. Work I could do in my sleep, but wouldn't. Not this time. This time it would be built to outlast personalities. By afternoon, facilities had removed the nameplate from the executive suite down the hall. HR scheduled listening sessions. Compliance pushed a mandatory training on version control. Auto-lock timers were enforced company-wide. People grumbled about the inconvenience. I didn't. Inconvenience is cheaper than repair. That evening, as I packed my bag, Nicole leaned on the doorframe. Is it true? I didn't give her gossip. I gave her the only thing I had for certain. Controls are changing. Her eyes softened. You okay? I'm tired, I said, and meant it. But I'm okay. 3 days later, Mr. Cole called me into his office. No polished speeches, no flattery, just a paper on his desk and a pen beside it. We need you to lead client finance and reporting on an interim basis, he said. Build the controls. Rebuild the trust. Choose your team. I'll need authority in writing, I said. Clear scope, no backdoors. You'll have it. He slid the letter across to me. And you'll report directly to me until this is stable. I read every line. Interim title, budget, head count. Final sign-off power with documented escalation paths. No hidden strings. I signed, then asked for an hour to send an outline. In my office, I drafted what I wished had existed before. Immutable versioning, restricted edit rights, device-bound sessions, quarterly access reviews, and a simple rule. No single person can both prepare and approve a report. I added something else, small but essential. A confidential route for anyone who noticed irregularities to escalate without fear. I pressed send. The weeks that followed weren't dramatic. They were disciplined. We rebuilt spreadsheets from scratch, moved source data into a controlled repository, and trained every manager on how to read an audit trail. People pushed back. It slows us down. I repeated the same line until it stuck. Accuracy is speed you don't have to buy twice. On a Wednesday afternoon, I found the last loose thread. A partner had quietly received one of the corrupted reports 3 weeks prior. I called him myself, apologized for the confusion, and sent the corrected file with a written explanation of our new process. He thanked me for the candor. Trust isn't won with perfect numbers. It's won with accountability when they aren't. Harrison stopped by more often now. Less frantic, more present. One day he stood by the window, hands in his pockets. I misread you, he said. I saw smoke and blamed the closest match. You corrected it, I said. That's leadership too. He smiled, a small human smile. Don't tell anyone. On a quiet Friday, I opened my notebook and turned to the first entry about odd changes. I added the last line at the bottom of the page, the only sentence I wrote without a timestamp. Facts are not loud, but they outlast noise. I closed the cover and slid it into the drawer. Here's what I didn't feel. Triumph. That would have been easy and untrue. What I felt was steadiness. I had not won a game. I had maintained a standard. There's a difference. That night, I walked past the glass conference room where so much of this began. The table was empty, the screens dark. For the first time in months, the building felt like a place where work could simply be work. People will tell you revenge is the point of stories like mine. It isn't. The point is boundaries. The point is telling the truth carefully, writing it down and standing inside it when it's tested. The point is knowing your value without screaming it and insisting that the systems around you reflect it. Numbers don't protect you. People do. Processes do. Your own spine does. I turned off the light and went home. Monday would bring new deadlines, new audits, new friction. But the ledger balanced again, and this time it wasn't luck. It was design.